Welcome everyone. Welcome to an exciting Cybersalon event. Again this month we have an exciting panel of speakers which I'm going to introduce in a minute. Thank you all for coming. I hope you had a lot of fun playing with the games we had installed for you, and please have a go at the end of the talk as well. A few words about the games out there. We have some new indie games. So we have David Kolli and Asho Loco. We have Richard Metzen and Off the Grid. We have the Oculus, which is brought to you by Cybersalon and Matter Agency, which is looking at ways to use Oculus outside games. We have a game called War of Mine. And lastly, we have what is called handbakedarcade.com, where you can actually visit them and they can install an arcade for you in your event or party or whatever. Our lovely Cybersalonistas James Moulding and Benji Greenaway organized all that, so a round of applause for them. Thank you. And moving on to our panel of speakers. The themes event is Games as Culture, as broad as a title that may be. Games are very much part of culture. Gamification is an argument we are all discussing. And of course, as a female gamer, I have to do this. Post Gamersgate, we do have a mixed panel of males and females, but just to prove a point, I would like all the female gamers to make some noise. Thank you. Just a tribute to a post-Gamersgate world. So I'll start introducing our fantastic panel of speakers. First up, we have a pioneer in computer games, the founder of Computer Artworks. You can also find him lecturing at the Goldsmiths University. This is William Latham, everyone. We have a MUD pioneer, multiple username for the 20s around here. Also the author of Designing Virtual Worlds, Richard Bartle, everyone. Next up, we will have a woman in the panel, yes, who is involved in installing gaming experiences in shopping malls around the world. Quite innovative work. So we will hear all about Devi Kolli, everyone. Then we'll move on to the journalism world. And Baraniuk, I'm sorry, I murdered the pronunciation there. He will talk about the games for good and playing with evil. So a binary opposition there for you. And lastly, I've been told not to say a lot about this project. I'm only allowed to introduce the name of the collective, and that is Seeing Eye, and that is all I can say. So we will start with William Latham. I hope you enjoy, and always remember to tweet. Yes, our Twitter hashtag is Cybersalon. And one small note, please remember to hold your drinks because the floor here is really hard and sometimes they fall on the floor and break. So please look after your drinks. Thank you very much, welcome and enjoy. I'll pass on the floor to William. Thank you.
For about 15 minutes about the games industry, a bit about the work I did late 80s, early 90s, making console games, and then more recent work around producing a game for docking protein structures with Imperial College and then at the end talking about a serious game for stroke patients to learn how to speak again. So the talk is going to be a mixture of new and old, and we'll cover quite a few different topics. So can we dim the lights a bit? Okay, so I'll keep going. So, I've got quite a diverse background. I originally trained as an artist at the Royal College of Art, and these are recent shots from an exhibition that I had in Brussels at the Einmal Gallery, where these are evolutionary structures that evolve in time using real-time. For reference, I have no interest in VR. So these are some of the other structures, and these recent. It ended up started to draw again after a gap of about 20 years, and then these are curtains that are produced from the graphics. So I'm currently a professor at Goldsmiths, and I run the MSc Computer Games course there. I have a whole number of PhD students, and I'm also a professor of computer art. So jumping back in time, this is some software that I produced at IBM that was in fact shown at the Digital Revolution show. And what is interesting about this software is the idea that the idea here was that if you were an architect and you ran out of ideas, this system would generate variants and you could breed architecture. And so basically you pick and breed, and quite quickly what happens is you start to, if you bump up the mutation rate, you get quite kind of modernistic buildings, and what's more, you can kind of crossbreed buildings. I gave a talk at the RIBA, this was about 1989, a little while ago, and showed them this software and said that they're all going to be out of jobs, and also the public could take part in designing buildings. So quite a preoccupation I've had is, really how great human creativity is with this sort of random number generator and a constrained structure with the idea of mutation. You can generate variants very, very quickly. And then we also did variants. So jumping around, I've only got 15 minutes. I left IBM, where I did lots of way out organic graphics, and then started working with rave bands like the Shaman, who gave me a pretty much free rein to do all their graphics. After having spent 6 years in a kind of corporate environment, I ended up directing music videos and all sorts of different projects. Had a lot of fun. And after that, I got approached by Warner Brothers to really reproduce the software that we'd been working on at IBM on a mainframe and develop an app, though they weren't even called apps then, for Windows 95 and 98. And this was the time of screensavers. Everyone would have kind of fancy screensavers, and this was like a cross between an art package and a screensaver. And by this time I was running a tiny company, and Microsoft included it in Windows 95 and Windows 98. The slight challenge at that time is encryption was virtually zero, so even though this product went extremely wide, we didn't always see all the royalties from them. Things have improved a lot since then. What was interesting, people could customize scenes and do what they wanted with them. After that, I started to go more and more mainstream. We worked on we designed, everything we did was from scratch, a game called Evolver for Virgin, where you could genetically modify characters. One thing that I learned is the public don't like things being too weird. So if you've got a character that doesn't look vaguely humanoid, you're not going to sell large numbers. And this, it was interesting, 15 years later, Will Wright, with his Spore game, hit exactly the same problem. Because the other problem with games of this type is they tend to be completely open-ended and very hard to test. So then another game I made was working, by this time I had about 60 people working for me, was for Vivendi, who approached us to do the sequel to the John Carpenter films, which is set in Antarctica, and they said, you've got just design a game where to pick up where the film ends. The problem with that film is one of the few films in Hollywood everyone dies. There's no one left. So we had to kind of contrive this elaborate plot. Anyway, this was a #1 hit. John Carpenter, the launch, signing copies. But this was, PlayStation 2. This was some of the concept work that I had produced. But the number of polygons you could play with was extremely limited. So one had to do very, very clever graphics. And we had quite a sophisticated AI system behind it. So it would have collaborative play. And I think that's one of the challenges I've always felt, that I try and make products a little bit too ambitious. But this did extremely well and was quite influential at the time. Jumping forward in time to about 6 years ago, I started doing work with the bioinformatics group at Imperial College, who work extensively with protein structures, such as beta barrels. And basically what they said was these protein structures have a lot of similarities to these organic forms that I've been producing. And from that, what we started to do was devise software where people could play with protein structures. And the holy grail here is that breakthroughs in this area has huge impact with drug design. So we tried several variants. And the idea here is that it's crowdsourced. So we release a game, you get hundreds of thousands of people playing it, banging through endless variants. And what's good about human players here is that they are much more efficient at doing certain things that computers can't do. Like humans have got very good spatial awareness, so they can see if something's going to fit, or see if something's symmetrical, see if something's balanced. And it's extremely hard to model that in software. So the aim here is to produce a game that is in the tradition of Galaxy Zoo, where people are classifying galaxies. There are a lot of galaxies out there, and there are also a lot of combinations of different ways you can dock protein structures. So recently, after doing lots of mainstream games, it's the kind of serious games space that I'm working in, and we won a big BBSRC grant to make a game for tablet around protein structures. So this is one of the in-game shots. The problem with if you're working in this space, you either end up having to do like a gross simplification, or you end up having to do a full physical simulation. So in the end, we've actually had to try and program the physics that are operating at this molecular level. But the results are looking extremely good. And I think there's a game called Folded that this rides on the back of. That was one of the more recent shots. One area that I'm getting interested very recently is areas where the human is completely removed from the system. And what we've been trying to do is program human aesthetics, and these are some of the rules that we have. So it looks for the number of holes in an image where there's a clear silhouette. And these are kind of typical decisions that a designer will be making. And then we have a scoring system. The one thing that it can't do is recognize content. Again, one of the things that humans are good at is if there's a kind of witch's face or a griffin lurking in the image, the machine is completely blind to it. But we're starting to work on trying to crack that. And this is some of the variants where we're breeding variants, and the machine is aesthetically pleasing, deciding which is the most aesthetically pleasing based on a set of rules. The idea of completely removing the human from the process. So coming back to neuroscience, I formed a company called SoftV, and to me neuroscience is where some of the most interesting research is being done. In particular, what we've been working on this game called Listen In, where so the problem with therapy is it's very boring. And if you've had a stroke and you've got to learn how to speak again, you need to be shown 4 cards: a cat, a house, and then there's an audio track that tells you whether you got the answer right. And so what we've done is we've built a complete meta game around this, that for every right answer they get a coin, which is launched into a game, And then a little bit like Peggle, there's a kind of complete gameplay mechanic built around an extremely boring task. And gamification around therapy in the NHS, I think, is a very, very interesting area. This is another game where we're stealing techniques from Candy Crush in number sequencing, and also where there's visual problems reading left to right. So in some ways this is the less exciting area of games, but my personal feeling is that the games industry is pretty saturated, and most games are it's probably about 5 main genres of game: first-person shooters, third-person, Pac-Man. There's a limited list, and every game that's produced is just a variant on these 5 or 6 main genres. Things like the freemium games model have come in along and shaken things up a bit, but ultimately it's a very kind of crowded space. The good news is with tablets or on those awkward controllers, the market for games is expanding at a rate. But ultimately, probably from my personal point of view, having done console games in the past, the kind of gamification, serious games area is probably the area that's most ripe for opportunity. And one area that I'm looking at the moment is games and car driving. So if you're going to have driverless cars, how you keep people alert whilst they're being driven around, so that when they suddenly have to take control back of the car, that they're not completely switched off. And the idea is that games could actually just keep the human active, so they're at alert for that point where they need to take control again. So that's 15 minutes.
We have some time for questions. Does anyone have some questions?
No, I come to the microphone.
You still play games then?
A bit. I only play particular games. I not as much as I probably should do. I guess you just become so familiar with games, but there's some great old games like Lemmings and things, some really great old games that probably need to be brought back to life. But that's a good question. Probably I'm more interested in art and serious games. Sorry.
Yes, you there.
Probably I can speak. Hi. The Doc IT game that you mentioned that you're working with Imperial College, was it something that you were targeting higher education? You mentioned that was related to showing proteins and the reaction between medical cells and viral cells. Is it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So is it something that you designed it for targeting specific higher education or training companies? So what's the purpose?
Okay, so the aim is to produce a mass market game that, if it's addictive enough, people would play just as a puzzle game. And so there's a competitive game called Folder, which is a very, very hard user interface. The aim is that it will have some educational benefit, and there'll be a pro version that drugs companies will be able to use, because we're building a sophisticated physical simulation. But the aim is to try and get a mass market game, because the same with Galaxy Zoos, they're classifying thousands and thousands of galaxies. The number of protein combinations is absolutely huge. So we actually need the large number of players to get through the amount of data. So that's the basic idea. I'm not sure I answered your question.
Is it something that you're currently testing? Is it something that?
Yeah, we've got a playable version, and we've got the physics working really well. Because what's interesting is you're docking 2 protein structures together, they flex slightly. Then also they tend to get, they creates a kind of vacuum where they get kind of stuck. So there's, the challenge is, people like really simple games like Tetris, where you can see exactly what's happening. If you've got two quite complicated three-dimensional objects that are flexible, how to make that a fun experience is the challenge. So we're having to create all sorts of reward systems so that the player feels good even if they're getting close to getting a correct docking position. But that's one of the problems with serious games is you've got to get the balance of a good science being yielded, but also you've got to have a really fun player experience. Thanks.
Thank you. There was one person there. There. So you're a regular, so we'll pass it on to the one next to you. Mr. David?
One of the things that has been talked about a lot in the media recently is the kind of the things that people can learn from gaming, like cooperation, collaboration, the sort of unintended consequence of having to do stuff with other people. And in some ways, serious games takes advantage of that. The fact that you don't know that you're learning something because you're just having fun. But I wonder if, as this sort of learning through gaming becomes more part of our culture, is there a risk that people become a bit too savvy about what's going on, become a bit too suspicious, and we actually lose that element of naivety that's required? Will people start to suspect that they're being taught things through games? How do we get around it?
Okay, that's a good question. So, having done quite a lot of work with neuroscientists, in some way, what's starting to happen now is that you've got the spec of a particular PC that you're using. You can say, well, the spec of a human is this. The attention span is X. The amount of data feeds that they can probably handle is about. Sorry. Okay. So we're working with neuroscientists. What's slightly uncomfortable is that in the same way that you talk about the spec of a PC, you can almost talk about the spec of a human. How many data feeds of information can they handle at the same time? How many audio sources? So it's reasonably easy to customize games to fully use up all those channels so that they're quite addictive. And certainly games companies really understand this space precisely. So I think I think humans will become more adept, and games will probably get faster in the same way that editing in film and TV is very, very quick now. But there's a point where you've sort of saturated the amount of input to a human, and people understand that. I think games addiction is going to become more and more of a problem. We had Henrietta Bowden-Jones talking at our conference last week at Goldsmiths about internet addiction. So yeah, I guess eventually probably people will get bored of the current set of games. I think I wouldn't say the games industry is going to have 20 years of continuous sales. I think the novelty will start to wear off on certain genres. I haven't answered your question very well, but I think it's conversely, games can be used for increasing performance. So if you're in the stock exchange or air traffic controllers, how you increase performance by gradually increasing the amount of data that they're having to handle. So probably games do help people prepare for ordinary life in the 20th century, having to deal with so much information. That's probably one of their main roles.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. There'll be lots of time for questions at the end of the speaker, and John, I promise, the first question is yours. Next up, Richard Bartle.
So that's how this works. Yeah.
There we go.
Okay. Being an academic, I have my own laser pointer, so I can blind anybody who attempts to ask awkward questions. Right, so my talk sort of follows on in some ways from William's, because he was talking about art as games, and I'm talking about games as art. Also, he was talking towards the end about serious games, and when you're talking about games as art, you're talking about deadly serious games. Right, so when I wrote this, I thought I had 20 minutes to tell you who I am. I've only got 15, so lap it up. As it happens, who I am and what I think about games as culture are sort of related, because if I explain to you where I come from, that'll explain to you why I see games as a force for good in current society. This is my axiom: games are an art form, and game designers articulate themselves through their game designs. Self-conscious art games aren't using gameplay to carry the artistic message, they're using the game as a medium, but they're not saying things through the games. They could say the same things through other games. I'm talking about using the games to say things because games are the only way you can say it. Right, so first of all, where do I come from? Okay, so this is a game, Wildstar Carbine 2014. It's a massively multiplayer online role-playing game. That's my character eating. And shortly after that, I deleted the character because I really just couldn't face another 30 levels. So Wildstar was based, or it came out of World of Warcraft, Blizzard 2004. Recently got back to over 10 million players with Warlords of Draenor. I stopped playing that after they introduced pandas. I had a slash played, which is how long you've played the game, a total of 227 days. That doesn't mean I played for 227 days, that means I played for 227 times 24 hours. So that was because, that was for qualifications actually, I just so that I could get up here and say it without you saying, you keep talking about games, you never play them. Well, I do, in your face. So the people who wrote Wildstar used to work at Blizzard, they knew about World of Warcraft, they went off and they did their version of World of Warcraft. Now the people who wrote World of Warcraft had played EverQuest. Sony Online Entertainment, 1999. They played EverQuest quite a bit. They thought we can do that only better, so they did. EverQuest, now that didn't just come from nowhere, that came from Dikumud. Now you may notice there's a slight difference between EverQuest and Dikumud. Yeah, the pictures are better in Dikumud. Dikumud is, the gameplay for Dikumud is the same as the gameplay from EverQuest. So much so that the people who wrote EverQuest were actually challenged to, they had to swear a statement that they hadn't used any Dikumud code, and the spelling mistakes they'd made that were the same were just by accident. Dikumud is Diku is something like Data Logic Institute, Copenhagen University. It's basically Copenhagen University's computer science department. Dikumud itself wasn't, all the gameplay in today's MMOs has its roots in Dikumud. Well, most of it, not all of it. But Dikumud didn't come from nowhere, it came from Abermud by Alan Cox, who later went on to be like the Prime Minister of Linux. And he wrote that at University of Aberystwyth, hence the Aber, in 1987. And Abermud, again, didn't come from nowhere, that came from a game called Mud by Roy Trubshaw and Richard Bartle. Written in 1978. I've put this in colour here because that way that looks more impressive. It wasn't actually in colour, in fact it wasn't actually on the screen. But Mud didn't come from anything, multi-user dungeon, and that's why I get to give this lecture talk, you don't. Now, of course, that explains why I get to give this talk, but it doesn't explain why I get to mention it, other than, hey, I'm still alive, folks. If you're looking for someone to nominate for a knighthood, how many billions does an industry have to be worth? So let's cast ourselves back in time to the making of Mud. There was two of us working on it, as I said, Roy Trubshaw. He did most of the physics and some of the content, and I did most of the content and some of the physics. As student once asked me why we wrote mud using text rather than graphics. This is why. Those machines behind Roy there are teletypes.
My God.
Yeah, also, you might be interested to know that there are more bits in that picture than there were in mud. Incredible. Anyway, because I was doing the content part, I had to decide what its fiction was going to be, what its setting. And there were no other games around at the time. I mean, I'd written more than I'd played, so I could have gone for anything. What I wanted to make was a place you could go to that was of Earth, but it wasn't Earth. So you went to somewhere and it was kind of like what you were expecting. It was a bit different, because I wanted people to be able to go there and throw off what they were doing in the real world. So I wanted something that was familiar, but kind of unfamiliar in its familiarity. So everybody thinks they know a bit about it, but I want the actual devil in the detail stuff. So I rooted the game in English folklore. Today we call it fantasy because J.R.R. Tolkien did the same thing when I was 6, so I guess I took it off him. I'd experimented with with this in a board game once, though, because I used to make board games when I was a kid. So I'd made what we now call fantasy board game. It's called Wizards and Heroes. It might be called Wizards and Heros because I couldn't spell, but once I'd taken the extra Z's out and added an E in Heroes, it worked fine. Anyway, I chose English folklore because what it did was it shaped a continuum to the past. So it wasn't set in a fixed period. This meant I could use time as a metaphor for danger. So the older things were, the more dangerous they seemed to be. So when you started playing the game, you were in a cottage, it was like 1930s cottage, wasn't too bad. Then you went a bit further north, you maybe got to a 1800s tin mine, and you went down a bit deeper, and then it was rather older, where all these dwarfs were down there. And if you went out to the island with a ring of stones on it, well, that's where you'd get eaten by the dragon. Well, it wouldn't even eat you, it'd just kill you. It wouldn't bother to eat you, why would it? It can just kill you for the fun. Anyway, we hoped when we wrote it that it would be rich enough to allow for emergent fun. So we just make this world that was strange and different, and people would do things in it, and in so doing they would build up differing goals, they'd occasionally conflict, they'd start to do things which impacted other people, kind of like how the real world works, because the real world doesn't have quests, it's all emergent out of the physics. Unless you believe in a deity, in which case it does have quests, but the quest giver doesn't tell you what the reward is until it's too late. Unfortunately, the computers of the day were too weak and puny for what we intended, so we couldn't actually, well, when we did it, it didn't pan out, but we just couldn't we didn't have enough richness for things to emerge, for content to emerge. So I finally decided to build in an achievement system. And I deliberated between a number of competing possibilities. So the idea of an achievement system is you've got some goals to aim at that are built into the physics. So you have got to do, well, you haven't got to do, but you actually get, you actually get like points which are associated with you as you build it. It's built into the world. It's not just something that you say, hey, I'm pretty good at something. There's actually something that tells you how good you are. Gamification is good at this. Anyway, the things that I considered equipment, so the more stuff you had, the better you were, but that's kind of a capitalist argument, and I didn't have much stuff, so I didn't really want to go with that. The skills, more skills you had. I'd seen some role-playing games which just coming out about then, tabletop ones which had skill-based systems. There was a level system with experience points, so you get a number of points when you go up a level, when you get new abilities and so on. Then there was experience points without levels, so you just get more and more points, and then you look at somebody and say, oh, they've got 250,000, they're obviously twice as good as someone with 125,000. I thought of linked quests using a choose-your-own-adventure system, because I've actually written a choose-your-own-adventure game when I was at school. Sadly, my company went bankrupt, whereas the company that I was working for went bankrupt, whereas the ones that went on were to Fighting Fantasy, Steve Jackson and Ian Livingstone, became the #1 best-selling books in Britain, which is pretty good because they're nice blokes. I had some other off-the-wall ideas as well for ways, and democracy was one, and it didn't really work because people don't actually want a democracy in these games. What they want is a benevolent dictator, basically gods. So I eventually chose to implement levels without experience points. Sorry, with experience points. So you get points, you go up levels. When you get to a level, you get a new bunch of things, and you've got these intermediate goals. So why did I do it? Well, I knew it worked because I'd played Dungeons and Dragons, and I'd seen that Dungeons and Dragons levels gave the intermediate goals. They're easy to understand. They allow rewards for a variety of activities. So kill something, you get points. Find some treasure, you get points. Do something clever, you get points. And they all add up, and then you go up a level. And they give people an immediate sense of their place in the current social order. You can just look at somebody, it tells you what level they are, and then you know what their status is relative to you. Yeah, some of the other approaches could have done that as well. Well, they could, except for that last one, which is giving people an immediate sense of their place in the current social order. So, now we get down to why I put that in there. This was 1970s. People like Roy and I weren't supposed to be at university in the 1970s. 1 in 7 people went to university, almost entirely middle and upper class. Roy's from Wolverhampton, sounds like he should be a factory worker. I'm from Yorkshire, I sound like a peasant. Every time I go to America, it adds 10 points to my IQ. I've got an English accent. They think I'm much smarter than I am. They also think I'm evil because of all the bomb villains. When I come down south, everybody thinks, oh, he's from York. He's 10 points off the IQ, down to 160. However, 1970s society needed engineers. In particular, it needed computer scientists. Middle-class people didn't want to send their children to study such technical, unintellectual topics. So some progressive universities did see it as a subject of the future, and they were prepared to offer courses in it. Essex University was one such one. It was formed by, the computer science department was formed by Professor Tony Brooker, who was a friend of Turing's. I have shaken hands with a man who was shaking hands with Alan Turing. That's why I never wash my hand. No. So very clever working class people were able to get a place on a computer science degree. Now, that sounds good. Oh, you poor little patronising, you can come to university, we let you come in and have it. Roy and I raged against this because we were marked out because of our background, our accents, our parents, our poverty. Everything held us down. My dad was a gas fitter and my mum worked in school meals. And people like that did not go to university in the 1970s. Most of the other students, studying all the other subjects, disparaged us. As for meeting girls, we did actually have girls, but the thing is that computer scientists are a bit more, they don't look at people as girls and boys, they look at them as people. So, you know, who was doing computer science with you? Oh, well, there's Roy, of course, he was quite tall, never did really get his moustache grown, but he still wears it. There was Kevin, he's got big afro. Then there was Gail, she was a girl. And there was Nigel, he had like a hook nose. And then there was Phil, he was Welsh, he had glasses. You know, it's just like a physical property. You wouldn't really regard people they just regard them as people. So girls in computer science were just like everybody else. They weren't going to meet girls either, because there was no. It was like an amorphous. So if you actually wanted to meet bona fide girls, you had to talk to them, and you couldn't because you were a computer scientist and they were doing sociology. So from our point of view, the real world sucked. What do you do when the real world sucks? Well, if you're a computer scientist, you make a better one. So that's what we did. We wrote a better one. All that stopped you rising levels in mud was your ability and your strength of character and your desires, because not everybody wants to. I mean, I built an achievement system, but actually a lot of people don't want achievement systems. They just want to hang around with other people. And players of MUDs, some of them are still playing after 25 years. And some of the people who played for 25 years spent the first 20 not bothering to go up the achievement level. I mean, it's that kind of thing. Now, my choice of levels, and Roy went along with this, it wasn't just me, that was a political statement. Because it was a political statement, that made it art. Not that I particularly cared, I just wanted to make the real world better because it wasn't doing a very good job of it itself. However, the people who wrote the MMOs that came after Mud, Abermud, Dikumud, EverQuest, World of Warcraft, Wildstar, in fact, pretty well every MMO that you can think of, even the ones in the Far East, ultimately descend from Mud. Well, they didn't know that about levels, they didn't know why I put it in. So they blindly employed concepts that made sense in Mud's context without knowing why they were there. Some of them, however, did add things of their own, which they were personally trying to say through the game, which were later adopted by others who didn't understand why they were there either. So what happens, they liberally added new levels that broke the personality that each level had. So they copied the science, but they lost the art. Right, I'm nearly finished. Mud enabled us to say unpalatable things about the real world through the protected frame of it's just a game. Yes, it is just a game, but that's deadly serious, that's what I meant. We were saying things about the real world that we could say through a game. What we were saying, well, the answer to that is you have to play the game to find out. If I could have said it in words, I wouldn't have had to written the damn game. That's what makes game design a form of articulation of the self. You have to play the game in order to understand what the designer's saying, because if the designer could say it in poetry or architecture or interpretive dance, then they would. But they can't. They can only say it in games because games is their medium. That's why they say it. That's why they're writing games rather than working for a bank or feeding the poor or going out shooting people on other sides in Syria. Whatever they could be doing, they decide they'd be doing games because that's how they express themselves. We wanted to make a virtual world because we didn't like the real world. Now, today's designers can do the same thing. All they've got to do is to realise it. You don't have to throw away a paradigm, you just have to understand it. Then you can throw it away. Right, okay, that's the end of my talk. So.
Quite a lot there, thank you. Who would like to go next?
Hi there. So when you said the players in these games, they don't want a hierarchy, they want a deity, what did you mean?
Well, if you like, I can come back in another couple of months and give you my games gods talk, but essentially, players, when they play games...
I think the people at the back wouldn't use the microphone, there's got another one up there.
Microphone?
There is the missing one, yes.
Forward?
Right, yeah, sorry. Okay, so I could, if you want, I probably don't have time now, but essentially, a deity is something which controls the physics of a world. So, let's say you believe in a deity that controls this world. Let's call that deity Zeus. So Zeus controls the physics of this world. Zeus can make anything happen to this world, but nobody else can, because they're embodied in the physics, whereas Zeus controls the physics. So from a practical point of view, MMO designers and developers are deities of the virtual world that they create. So they actually are gods, first and foremost. Whether they like it or not, there have been a number of attempts to stop them from being gods, where they abrogate their responsibility to the players, but it always comes back. The players, the technical term is ask for a pony. It's like you've got a rich parent, and they promise their little kid everything, and the kid says, "Oh, can I have a new doll? Yeah, you can have a new doll. Can I have a new bike? Yeah, can I have a new bike? Can I have a new rocket pack? Well, you can have this one that looks. Can I have a pony? No, but you said I could have anything." And that's what happens. Designers always have have, whether they like it or not, they've always got the ultimate power of the game's physics. That makes them gods. So even if the players don't want there to be gods, there are gods. I mean, in real life, I'm an atheist. I don't believe there's a god for this world. But for virtual worlds, there is one. Because I've been one for 30 years. By the way, I ought to tell you that the reason I created that world was because the real world sucked. So if you believe in heaven, why would God have made this world? Because heaven's even worse. No. I mean, it is a bit, I don't mean to disparage people's belief, but I mean, I'm just basically giving us a summary as to why it is that the people who control these games are actually, with respect to the games, not with respect to the real world, obviously, they're gods. So the players want benevolent dictatorships because when they try and control things themselves, well, actually, controlling things themselves isn't all that fun. It is for a bunch of players, and there's a player type theory which explains all this by Richard Bartle. So there is a particular trajectory that some players follow which leads some of them into positions of powers. We call them politicians. But most players just want to get on with playing. They want the game to work smoothly. They don't care who's in charge, so long as the game is fun to play. So they want someone who's controlling the game, who's controlling the physics, who's stopping people coming in and doing horrible things to them, just so that they can play. If they found it interesting to have some kind of hierarchies and democracy, things like that, well, there aren't enough people do that. Not enough people want to. Some people do. They end up as guild leaders. They end up as customer service reps, also organisers. There are some who do that. Fortunately, they aren't all like that, because if they were, then the game would collapse. Most of the players just want someone in charge who leave them alone to have fun.
Right.
Okay, so there's...
Sorry. So I've got actually a Warcraft question. I've got 200 plus days myself.
Yeah.
And you're playing Warlords of Draenor.
No, I'm not playing that. I'm playing the Secret World at the moment. I've only got about 112 days on that.
All right. What's quite interesting actually, but you know, given from a gate, you know, talking about gods, what Warcraft did when we talk about Guildmasters was actually put a social order in, and that was why people got so obsessed with it in 2003. What I think is quite interesting, and I'm sorry I haven't played it yet, is that actually they've done a complete 180 and actually turned it into pretty much a solo game by putting you at the centre of it with your own garrison, and they've actually completely destroyed the whole guild system. So they've gone completely the opposite direction.
Well, the guild system, just a technical thing for non-WoW players, guilds are essentially groups of people who are hang about together, and they tend to do things with each other because they're like-minded people. Sometimes like-minded is the same mind that nobody else does like, but most of the time it's just generally people who, like if they speak the same language as you, you probably want to hang out with them rather than the ones that speak a different language. Guilds are groups of anything between about 1, and a large number of them actually have about 1 member, up to 250, something like that, players, Dunbar's number. Now, World of Warcraft introduced this concept of raiding, where the high-end players, the top 10% at the end, would all spend their time in very complicated instances of the game, essentially learning to dance with one another. Monsters did things. If they did them, then you had to respond in the right way, otherwise the whole raid wiped and you get shouted at. Now, those raids are expensive to make, and if only 10% of your player base ever gets to experience them, you're wasting them. So they introduced this, but guilds were there. If you joined the right guild, you could get into a raid. Then they introduced this looking for raid concept and made the raids a bit easier, so more people would experience the raid content, so that they wouldn't find that they wouldn't be wasting their money having created this stuff. But if you got looking for raid, you don't actually need the guilds to support it. So, although there are guilds, because plenty of people want to hang out with other people just to chat and make sarcastic remarks or whatever, their impact is no longer as strong as it was. And then they've introduced this new thing now where essentially you get a bunch of non-player character followers, and they're your guildies, and they're going back to their original what was called playing alone together concept. So you played the game with other people, but you're basically playing on your own. But you'd never have played it on your own for 200 days if you just downloaded it and it was a single player game. You do it because there's other people around validating what you do. And again, there is a big theory about why people do that. And again, I could talk about it another time, but probably not now. Cool.
Yeah, one more last question,
Oh,
and then
three.
we have questions again at the end of the talk.
The one at the front here was first, I think.
Naomi?
Yeah, there's a mic coming from behind.
Oh.
Thank you. I was wondering, what are your thoughts on integrating moral decisions within a video game, which seems to be quite a trend lately. Did you think about doing that with mod, or how do you think it adds to the player's experience?
Integrating, well, so you want to know, did we think about integrating moral experiences? We thought about integrating every experience into mud. We wanted all experiences to be mud. We wanted the mud to be like the real world, but better. So moral, yeah, that was just part and parcel of it. Now today we've got this, the thing is, again, you integrate these moral experiences, but they're all there at the surface level. The power of games, okay, so they have got some power at the surface level, like I can tell you every country in Europe, not because I've got a map of Europe in my office, although I have, but it is from 1870, 1869. But I can tell you the name of every country in Europe because I've played so many games that it's just seeped in. So games are great at teaching fact, but the payload for games, where the art comes over, is in the gameplay. Now, if you want to integrate moral experiences into games at that level, I'd be all for it. But they never do implement it at that level. In Star Wars Galaxies, which I played for 113 days, 6 hours a day, finished on May the 4th, it seemed appropriate. That had a built-in morality compass. So you did things, and either move you towards the dark or towards the light. After about 3, you just went with whichever one you'd chosen. So there was something that I was looking at, thinking, well, actually, these don't seem all that light to me. These seem quite dark. Would a good person really do that? Would they really snitch on somebody? And then I thought, well, who cares? It's a light. I'll just click on the light. So the games that tend to do this, they end up binary. You don't get these shades of grey like in the real world. You get this binary. It's either everybody always clicks the one that takes you one, and they always click the one that takes you other. And if you don't tell them which one to do, they go and look it up on the internet to find out which is the right one to do, in order to enhance their goodness or their evilness. So yes, you can do that, but I don't think games are doing it right at the moment. There are some very strong narratives in games which say things, but I mean they pale compared to some of the, like in World of Warcraft. This isn't a morality thing. This is just something that World of Warcraft does. It's got different character races. So it can be an elf, it can be a dwarf, it can be a human, a troll, a gnome, panda, a cow person, a tauren. It can be all these things. But what's that actually saying? What that's saying is that individuals are marked at birth to be one of something, and they can never get out of that. They're called races. They're actually more like species, but people read them as races. You know, it's like come to sunny America, where all our different cities are all built up out of little pockets of people who have all seventh generation Koreans who've never married out of the Korean community. That's not how you really want. Well, it's not how I particularly want the world to be thought. I think there shouldn't be a bit more integrationist. Shouldn't there be half elves, half dwarfs? I mean, like, why? But the thing is, that was put there for a gameplay reason, because they wanted to give particular advantages, and they wanted people to choose their characters and all sorts of things. But what it's actually saying isn't what it was put there for. What it's saying is pretty well racist. But that's the same in a whole bunch of games, going right the way back to Dungeons and Dragons. So, although it's racist and it's accepted by players, you've really got to challenge it. Come on, that's saying something and you haven't thought it through. So if you want to say something with a moral thing, put it into your structures of the game. Don't just say to, do you want to do the evil thing or the nasty thing? Actually, make them do something and give it consequences. And whether it's evil or nasty, evil or good, is for the player to decide. They might think that hooray, I managed to save that woman from marrying that dreadful prince. On the other hand, they might think, oh no, I've condemned this woman to a life as a kitchen servant when she could have been a princess.
We'll talk a little bit about gender race
well,
in the discussion, definitely.
Isn't that where Eve actually moved things along morally? Because
Eve is an emergent game and it's much better at that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, Eve.
Let's keep some questions towards the end.
Sorry.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Devi Kolli is next.
Hey everybody, I'm just going to try and see if this is going to work. I had some interesting videos I wanted to share, but it wouldn't work on the other system, so I had to swap this. So let's hope that it would work on this. Not hoping. Okay. There it comes. I'll just do that, I guess. Yeah. Okay. Hi. Good evening, everybody, and thank you, Eva, for inviting me here. I'm Devi Kolli, CEO of AI Solve. We are a technology provider of virtual reality and augmented reality solutions. And right, we provide all kinds of gamification solutions. We have, back in 2010-11, we've started with gamifying training solutions, such as trainings. We created training simulations for vocational trades, and we won a number of international awards for what we created, the gaming experience within the trade sector. And we took it a step further. We actually created our own handheld motion-based controller, which was a great success because it's a multi-tool which would act like a hacksaw, or it would be a measuring tape, or it would be a pipe bender. It just does pretty much everything, and with haptic feedback system. So we moved on from there. We still continue to do training simulations from military to medical to all kinds of industries. We experimented with visualization. We had an inquiry from LA-based company for doing some previous stuff for movies, and that's when we got introduced to visualization. And when we got into it, we felt there's a lot of hundreds of players within this market of visualization. There was nothing exciting for us because what we do is we gamify things. So we started looking at how do we gamify visualizations, and we did actually end up gamifying visualization. What it did help us do is actually make it better, and we were able to provide real-time walkthroughs, and people could literally go through any of the rooms, change things on the fly, change the content, the furnitures, the room colors, whatever they want. And my favorite bit is actually, by gamifying, we were able to simulate few of the real world sort of behaviors. Let's say, I think some of you might be familiar with the sun path analysis. And the application where we're using these game-based visualizations are pretty much in the shopping malls. So my clients love it because when they have a restaurateur who wants to sign up, whether they're not facing, south-facing on a multinational, multi-story building, this tool really helps them make some very key high-value purchase decisions. So we're pleased with that results there. Now, today's focus of my talk is really going to be about how we're using games in the edutainment space. So I'll save that for later. And yes, we do, time to time, do a lot of games for marketing and advertising spaces, and we use AR a lot within this space. So at the core of our company, we are really a games company, but to be honest, we specialize in a lot more technologies because that's how we make these unique experiences. We specialize in artificial intelligence, motion sensing, 3D graphics, augmented reality, image processing, and yes, to name a few. Now, I would like to share a case study today about an edutainment solution we have provided to Yasmall. This is based in Abu Dhabi, and it's for a 77,000 square feet shopping mall. They have a dedicated indoor theme park space, which is targeting 4 to 12-year-old young children, yes. So there are about 12 amusement centers within that space, and we are supplying turnkey solutions for 2 amusements. So I'm only going to share one amusement here, which is actually Superworks. Now, Superworks is my real favorite. It's getting installed as we speak. Half of my team are there in Abu Dhabi doing that. It's open for public from the 11th of December. So the unique thing about, we provide a unique gaming experience within the Superworks by combining 3 different technologies. Now, as I mentioned here, first part is we combine a face capture, 3D face capture and avatar creation. We experimented with a lot of motion sensing and immersive displays to make it very immersive, and then finally we actually have the 3D game and real-time cinematography. So let's see how we've done that. What I have here is just the outside of what the booth's going to look like, and we have created 6 different bespoke games targeting these age groups, 4 to 12-year-olds. And there's a character called Dr. Spark who actually has picks up 6 of these kids as their trusted warriors to save the world. So the edutainment element here is really, there are so many social messages that we have conveyed through these games. So while as we all know, kids love playing games, but we wanted them to learn something while they're actually playing these games. And that's how these games have been cleverly designed. So I'll just quickly talk through how this whole thing works. So as the kids go into the front, and this is the far shot, we have here, let me see if I've got a better shot of that, yep. We have here that the kids would first go into the face capture booth, where they'll get their face captured in 3D, and they then go into these little kiosks that are standing there. There's just a little probably 30 square meters space, sorry, 30 square feet, I think, whatever. So they would then go into that avatar creation suite, where they'll be able to actually have a personalized 3D avatar using their own face. So that's really very lovely. And they can select their own dressed avatar in their own ways, they like it. And we have actually got 4 boy themes and 2 girl-based themes, so we're catering for both genders. And they then, once their avatar is ready, they just go into one of these 6 booths, which is, we created a cost-effective 270-degree immersive display using some very clever projecting systems. And once the child actually has those experience of actually plays the game in first-person perspective using Kinect and technology, and once they finish with the game, they actually come out. Sorry, I think they would come out into the exit area where they'd get a DVD with them actually filming, starring in that movie. So, it all happens in real time. It's a 15 minutes end-to-end experience, and that's what they get. So they're not just getting the social message while they're actually playing, but they actually get to see their own movie starring within that particular game. And not just that, we've taken it a step further. We can actually print out a 3D printout of them being a superhero. So I've got, just like I said, we got 6 different themes. Each theme has got its own objectives that they have to meet, and they would all have reward points at the end of how well they perform. And I have a short video here, hopefully you will play. Must be my volume. So it's a very quick edit of all the different themes that we have. This is from the first perspective that they would actually play within the booth. We had to keep the game itself quite simple in a way that is actually targeting the 4 to 12-year-olds. So. Okay. So what I have next is actually the cinematic version of what they'd actually get within the DVDs, with all those cinematics within there. I had my 5-year-old boy test it when the games were kind of nearly there, and I was really pleased when that weekend he was just doing those gestures. I was so happy when I saw him do that. Right, I think I'm pretty there. Like I said, that was just a little 3D printout of example of that, and that's the exit area where they get to see and collect their DVDs. Of them starring in a movie. So I have here another example completely out of what the edutainment side, how we're using games for the shopping mall areas, and we strongly believe, I work so closely with the shopping malls and theme parks, we believe those spaces are completely underutilized. So we are now using the advanced augmented reality as well as the gaming, we are now giving them solutions where the kids and the audience can actually play within those spaces. So thank you for your time, and that's what we do.
I have a quick question. How much is the narrative of what you can do driven by the client? Like you mentioned Abu Dhabi, some Middle East. There's a lot of things, sustainability issues, ethics, that you could raise maybe in a game. How much is forced on you in terms of the client, or how much do you take back to them?
I think because it's the Middle East, I have to say there were few restrictions, particularly on the gender side of things. There were, we had initially characters which were quite muscular because we were constantly thinking about superheroes, but then they wanted some of those to be toned down, especially when we were talking about female characters as well. So, and the clothing, the colors, they were particular about that, but we didn't really see that as hindering any of our gameplay as such, and we were probably lucky, I guess. Yeah.
I can see how a lot of the themes in your gameplay would work for perhaps older boys and girls from around maybe 9 to 12. I teach infant school children. And I have to say that the themes that you have is very violent for a lot of young children, especially if your age range starts at 4. Actually, a lot of children who would see those images would be quite frightened of the darkness, you know, the dark trees that are moving and the energy beams and the guns and such. Did you not consider perhaps having a wider range of experience for the children that were playing the games in terms of perhaps skill-based games or sports games? You know, why did it have to be involved around sort of violence and superheroes and stuff? Because I think that's quite inaccessible for a lot of younger children. I know my kids that I teach wouldn't want to play those games.
Yeah. No, thank you. That's a very interesting question. I guess part of that question might be because what I've shown you here is just things totally as snippets from those themes itself. So this is one of the things my client was really very keen and particularly very focused, that a lot of the colors and the shades and the gameplay itself was significantly changed from what it was at the beginning, considering the sort of age groups we were working with. And when you probably see the games in its entirety, you would actually see they were so toned down, they don't look as scary as some of the clips probably I've shown you here. Having said that, the concept, the social messages itself are very powerful. Like, I haven't really given you any of the narrative that's behind the gameplay. For example, one of their gameplay was about this evil plot where their magnetometer equipment, which would take away all the alphabets away, and as they just go through and so forth. So constantly, what the kid is also doing while playing this, I understand there's the element of fighting and everything else, but I guess that comes with the superhero experience. That's what some of the kids would expect, and they have been exposed to games outside. It's quite a broad area, yeah.
With the experience you're showing them, it's based around threat level, and increasing of threat level to suppose a level of agitation, which is going to get the kids excited. But at that age, a lot of children work around team games and the competitive sense of gaming, and not necessarily about defeating evil or threats to their existence. And I just think that, I think some kids would. I do believe some kids would really get into that. I can imagine my 7-year-old nephew really loving the work you've done. And I'm just thinking of some of the boys and girls in my class, for instance, who are 4 or 5 years old, 6 years old, and I just think that they would be put off by the very niche nature of the gaming experience you're providing. I think it's almost like you've taken the idealised view of what you think is a good, exciting game for adults, but then kind of reduce the colour palette and put it in the guise of superheroes, and I don't know if it necessarily translates that way.
I think the answer for that would be it's what the client wants. So if I were to, and we do a lot of social serious games, like I said, and we built a number of games for more younger groups, from infants and which are very soft and we're really easy to use and so forth. So the application of this particular game is what the client wants, and it's a theme park, and theme parks are all about generating the traffic, the flow, getting fun, but at the same time they also wanted to try out the social message through the games. So it's a part of the requirement, I guess.
Okay, thank you. We are running a little bit late, so thank you for having questions, and please save them for the end. Thank you so much. Next up is Chris Baraniuk, I think, Baraniuk, a journalist, as I said, and he will talk about the good and the evil in video games. His title is more jazzy than mine.
I know we're a bit late in the event now, so you probably want something really exciting and fun, which is good, because I'm talking about good things and bad things, gaming for good or playing with the devil. And we're going to start with this. This is Jim McGonagall's book, Reality is Broken, Why Games Make Us Better and How They Can Change the World. It was published in 2011, and since then I think the book has had quite a big impact, and there are some really interesting things that have come out of it that I want to talk about here. So this is one thing that I wanted to begin with. Why do we play games? Why do we play games today in the context of ours that we live in? Computer and video games, writes McGonagall in her introduction, are fulfilling genuine human needs that the real world is currently unable to satisfy. A little bit like what Richard Bartle was saying earlier. Games are providing rewards that reality is not They are teaching and inspiring and engaging us in ways that reality is not. So there's something about games that we can't really get anywhere else. And I think that's a really good point. Also, games are quite stimulating, aren't they? We do enjoy playing them. Now, whether you think games are problematically addictive or not, we do derive pleasure from overcoming the achievements that we can engage in those games and the challenges that we can overcome. And what I'd like to introduce now is McGonagall's big idea. In her book, she's saying that we can leverage this enjoyment of playing games to achieve things that actually extend beyond the game itself, things that are bigger than getting a high score or completing the game. And she means things like this, which we've already heard about actually earlier in William's talk. This is Folded, and William mentioned this. This is a game where people try to fold protein structures, finding out how they interface with other proteins and different things in the body. And of course, this game is quite widely known. McGonagall uses it as a kind of very interesting example. Games can contribute to real science. They have a real benefit for scientific study. So we've already heard quite a bit about that, so I'm going to skip quite quickly on to another example, which is a bit more recent. This is Never Alone. This is a game that's actually just released last week. Now, Never Alone, completely different objective here, but similarly it is also a puzzle game. The idea is that through playing the puzzles, the player engages with a story that's really the property of the Inupiaq community in Alaska. It's a Native American community. And this game came out of an effort to try and preserve that culture and those stories. So here we have a very broad objective for the game to pass that culture forward to future generations. Let's have another one. It's a bit different. This is Zombies Run. Some of you may know this, some of you may love it. It is a very popular app that helps people enjoy and engage with their morning running routine. You're told that zombies are chasing you and the game kind of spurs you on to escape them. So it's kind of an adjunct to physical activity, which you may also find enjoying, but it's something that kind of augments that enjoyment and gives you a kind of record of your progress as well. Let's have one more of these things. Who is this man? This is Jeff Orkin. Jeff Orkin is a relatively well-known developer, and he is kind of famous in the gaming world for helping to design the artificial intelligence in the Fear series, the first-person shooter games. Now, Jeff is today he's working on some very interesting projects to do with artificial intelligence. His idea now is, rather than getting down to the drawing board and coming up with AI that will really make a game diverse, he actually wants to crowdsource behavior from human players. And he's doing that through the medium of online mini-games. So people go online, they play interesting little scenarios such as ordering food in a restaurant or helping people survive some apocalyptic scenario, whatever it happens to be. And their behavior is recorded, harvested, and Orkin's plan is then to use that in a future A-list commercial video game. And I interviewed him for New Scientist magazine in September, and he said this: once you open that up, and that he means the game development process, to the game playing public, potentially millions of people, you have these characters who can surprise players and create a more lifelike experience. The whole idea is to make NPC activity more interesting and more nuanced. So here we have a whole range of things. We have games benefiting science, preserving culture, improving our personal fitness, and of course contributing to the production of even more sophisticated video games, which is very worthwhile in. So here's what we might call it, this is all gaming for good. But I suppose what I want to really focus on is the flip side. What happens when there are negative consequences? So to that, we might turn to this, which I know many of you will recognize. This is Ender's Game, the film, of course based on a book. The story is wonderful, it's very imaginative. It's about a boy in a future world whose adeptness at video games is kind of harnessed by the military. They want to defeat an alien adversary that they fear will wipe out the human race. So they leverage this boy's talents in simulation to train him up to be essentially their savior. What Ender, the protagonist here, doesn't realize is that in his final simulation where he defeats the alien adversary in the game, he's actually done this for real. This has caused it's essentially a mass genocide. And he is, of course, completely torn apart by this, the emotions of this. Now, Ender's Game is kind of fantastical, but I think it's really interesting to think about, and I kind of bring it up because last year I read a very interesting article about this man. You may know him. He is called Brandon Bryant, and last year he gave an interview to GQ magazine in which he described his experiences as a weapons operator for US drone program. So Bryant suffers from post-traumatic stress disorder and is now actually campaigning about those kinds of issues with military technology that he was so exposed to. Now, there are a lot of differences between Ender and Bryant, and it's worth pointing out that Bryant was cognizant of the fact that he was employed to kill human beings. He didn't think he was playing a video game, that's not what happened. But he read Ender's Game while he was doing this work, and he mentions it in this article, in this interview with GQ, and I think it's really chilling actually, because there were some things that do strike a sort of similar chord, and one of those things is something that he found out, some information about his activity that he only realized when he was discharged from the military, and that was the number of people that he killed in action, that his weapons operations killed in action. How many people do you think that might have been? I mean, that could have been maybe 50, 100, a few hundred people. When he left the military, he claims that he was told that he killed 1,626 people. Now, Bryant said to GQ, he said, this number made me sick to my stomach. And there are echoes with Ender's experience here. Perhaps Bryant wasn't playing a video game, like I said, but perhaps he could have been. Military training simulations are extremely important. They've been used for decades to help train soldiers and sharpen their abilities. Nothing necessarily wrong with that. We might want them to make mistakes in simulation rather than on the battlefield. It's a very good way of training soldiers. But what one might consider is whether training in this way, or aligning, or kind of blurring the line between simulation and reality, is ultimately good or bad. Does it does it sharpen a soldier's awareness of their surroundings? Does it make them more or less cautious when it comes to the real thing? Do interfaces like this have any impact on the likelihood that they'll develop PTSD when they leave military service? Those are the kind of questions that are really only being asked today, despite these things being quite highly advanced. This is actually a very interesting system. If you want to look it up, it's called Intelligent Decisions Dismounted Soldier Training System. And these soldiers are training on a mission in a virtual environment. They're using VR headsets, microphones, and earpieces to communicate with one another. So, moving away a little bit from sort of military applications, what I talked about a little bit earlier, and what we've also heard from other speakers, is this idea that games could be leveraged to achieve positive consequences. But let's just sort of abstract that. What if a game was released tomorrow with consequences that were actually negative? What if a game maybe was hijacked somehow in its code to create some sort of negative impact on the world? And I just want to introduce a slightly different idea here. This is an area where activity is being hijacked for someone else's good. Now, this is computers being hijacked to actually mine Bitcoin for other people. So this is malware that was distributed on Yahoo. This is a common problem with malware. People's computers are compromised, and then their processes or their activity is leveraged for someone else's gain. Okay, so it's a very sort of general concept. But think about that in the context of games. What games may be hijacked in this way? And if you start to think about this, I think there are certain categories of video games, if you kind of broaden the definition just a little bit, that are already leading to negative consequences. So many of you are probably aware that Charlie Brooker has described Twitter as a video game, and he did this quite famously in his documentary last year, How Video Games Changed the World. His reason for that, his reason for sort of saying Twitter is a video game, was that he saw it as an MMO. He saw it as an MMO where you go online, you choose an avatar, you create a persona loosely based on yourself, and then you rabidly try and acquire as many followers as possible, as many interactions as possible. That's the sort of competitive element of Twitter, the video game. And this also inspired Keith Stewart, his colleague at The Guardian, to make this assertion. Ending on Twitter was clever, I thought, because the one obvious way games have changed the world is by infecting every other user interface on the planet. So this is what I think is really interesting for myself, I think. I hope you agree. But Jane McGonigal was talking about the enjoyment we have in playing games, the way that the sort of power that they have over us. It can be wonderful, can be escapist, can be enlightening, and we can use that for wonderful things. But what about these situations where it's used for things that we might regret later, actually? And the one thing that I write about quite a lot these days is privacy and personal data on websites like Facebook and other social networks. Now, Facebook, let's take Charlie Brooker's kind of Twitter as a video game logic. Let's apply it to Facebook. What does Facebook have? Well, it has a completeness level. Your profile is so-and-so percentage complete. You have competitive element in the number of friends or interactions or likes that you have. And it also encourages you to kind of play the game of Facebook. If you kind of read between the lines a little bit of how Facebook is constructed, you're encouraged to engage, you're encouraged to progress on your quest of being a good Facebook user and playing all of the games, interacting with advertisements, being part of Facebook democracy and those kind of groups. These days, the problems that come with that may be quite unforeseen when you first sign up to a service. So I'm sure lots of you know what this is, PRISM and government surveillance. These stories have been all over the press for the last year. And one common response to these stories that I hear quite a bit is that, well, okay, yes, government surveillance is bad, corporate exploitation of data very bad, but people did elect to put their data into those services, didn't they? They made that choice, they're kind of in the bargain. They should probably have thought twice. And I think that's an interesting thing to say, because when you really think about it, those services are engineered to encourage your continued use of them. They're engineered to provoke your continued dissemination of your own data and intimate details into the receptacles that we then find out later may be compromised. So this is something, these consequences are not always obvious. It's not something that's always obvious to the user. Sometimes it's not even obvious to the company that created it. It might be perpetrated by a third party, a bad guy from some other realm that we only find out years down the line. And an example of that, something like the snapping. Snapchat, again, using Charlie Brooker's logic, a kind of social game. We engage in this sort of trading of pictures. They're meant to be as funny as possible or risque as possible. And interestingly, Snapchat actually calls the number of snaps that you've sent and received your score. So they've borrowed that sort of gaming terminology. It's your score. And here we have again, third-party Snapchat app being compromised by hackers. You're threatening to release all your naked selfies to the world. I mean, that's kind of the last thing you want, really, isn't it? You're just having a fun time. So why are we so accepting of this idea that we're kind of in for the bargain? Actually, it's much more complicated than that. These services essentially goad us into using them and being intimate with them, and the consequences of that are sometimes difficult to see, but that goading is achieved through a sort of gesticulating towards the terminology of games, the kind of gameplay that we all know from video games and other physical, real-world games. So I suppose the whole point I'm making is about how games really are influencing all areas of the services that we use and the ways that we interact. And the more that they do that, I do think we do have to be on our guard, actually. The nefarious side of a gamed reality, if you like, is only just beginning to kind of creep out of the woodwork. And the consequences are very difficult to understand from one point to another. So, I mean, suffice to say, the positive things, the things we talked about earlier, the hype around those is much deserved, and we should only continue to kind of pursue those ends. But we shouldn't forget that people will try to exploit these techniques and use them against us. It could come back to bite us. Instead of gaming for good, we might find ourselves playing with the devil. Thanks very much.
Okay, thank you so so much. A couple of questions, and can I ask the panel to start walking into the stage so we could take group questions?
Oh, don't hurt me.
Where's the second mic?
Thanks. So earlier in the talk you mentioned about gaming for evil. Well, I remember I've seen a lot of people who play Street Fighter and Tekken, all these different fighting games and other sorts of violent games, and there's this whole kind of thing that, oh, playing violent games is bad for you. Well, I actually see the good in that, how do I say this? Oh gosh, there's a lot of people here. So I guess the kind of point I'm trying to say is that the way I see it is that some of these violent video games can be actually used to improve one's reflexes in everyday life, such as like catching something if it falls. What are your thoughts on that?
Okay, so you guys got like 3 hours or something, because this is such a huge area, and I mean this is just a recurring kind of lament of culture. Every time something interesting happens, that people engage with a new form, people get freaked out about it. I mean, it's happened since ballroom dancing. I don't know if you know, but 150 years ago, people thought ballroom dancing was going to corrupt everyone. Television came along. There's a great article by Laura June on The Verge about how pinball machines were seen as this great kind of corrupting force in kind of the downtown areas of big American cities. So we've gone through this so many times. I think that there are some areas of games and violence that are problematic in terms of representation and maybe the way that violence is represented, but the research is so diffuse and so difficult to kind of trust. I think what you have to do is, can you take me along and show me a quantified study where you have hundreds of people playing a game and then they're instantly turned into psychopaths? No one's ever presented this evidence, and
the other way around.
Yeah.
Wasn't there a Harvard study?
There was. I think you're referring to the study that was published last week.
I think it's some months ago.
Okay.
But it showed exactly the other way around.
Yeah. So there's actually been a couple of studies this year which are really interesting. There was one last week. I can't remember where it's from exactly, but they were saying that a lot of the research on video games kind of equating to violent behaviour is very flawed. And there's a lot of research that does suggest that interacting with these environments can actually give people a greater sense of awareness. It actually maybe improves their sort of awareness of moral codes and so on. This is such a big, mushy topic, and it's always kind of leveraged by people who want to sort of point out, oh, this is evil game destroying society, and I just don't buy it, basically. Any other questions? There's one here.
That actually ties into the question that I was going to ask, which is about acting out our emotions. Actors on stage, they present something that resonates with us, and I find that when I'm gaming, I get caught up in what the character's doing, and it can be sometimes being aggressive and violent is really cathartic because you're actually going, whatever's going on in your life, you are taking it out on something that can be, it's not doing any harm. But there's also this thing in gaming of where you can take risks in a game that you couldn't necessarily take in real life. So you make an investment in your game character. And I just wondered, as the boundary between games and social platforms is dissolving, is there a risk that we lose that kind of protected, what was considered, aside from characters bullying each other occasionally, generally speaking, games are a safe environment into which you can put bits of your psyche and risk them. Do you think that's in danger because games are becoming more social and more about your need to present your character to the outside world more?
I think that makes sense. Yeah, no, it does. I think it's a really interesting question, and I think I'm talking about social media as kind of game-like environments, and you only need to look to areas like that to see that there is a very kind of unforgiving body of people who use services like that, and it sometimes gives a very dangerous platform to different sorts of opinions, different sorts of approaches to arguments that can be quite defeatist and intimidating. So I think that games kind of opened up to the world, MMOs kind of the great challenge of integrating all these different people from behind video screens, you know, and I've written about things like de-individuation and so on, and sometimes it's not easy to get people to interact humanely with one another through any kind of video medium. So I think those are things that need to be addressed, but I think I really liked a comment that Richard Bartle, I think, made earlier about how morality can be built into the structure of a game. You don't have to tell people what's good and bad. You know, if you're going on Twitter and you're kind of writing something that's misogynist and a little pop-up box goes, do you know you're being misogynist? I don't think anyone's going to go, oh gosh, silly me. You know, I think that the way that these systems work, you know, if the game ultimately, through its gameplay, rewards bad behavior, then that may be a problem, actually, in terms of kind of interacting with other people. If there are other human beings in the game, yes, that could be problematic, but the game could be thought about in different ways, and it could be more complex. Any other questions? There's one at the back here. Has anyone got a microphone? No? No? Is there a microphone, anyone? Yeah. Here it comes.
Hello there, yeah. I was just thinking about the whole thing's turned into, for me anyway, kind of like a morality thing about gaming, maybe, has been the topic and subject. I was thinking about, if we are talking about games and game design and development, I really would like to know you guys and your opinion of the pay-to-win kind of infrastructure in games currently, and being in infrastructure in game design, does that injure the player, and is it a bad thing because it's very business-like?
Yeah, I think it depends. I suppose you can take all kinds of things when it comes to money, like spending money on games. There are all kinds of things you can question. I mean, of course, it puts certain games, it puts certain achievements in games out of the reach of some people. Also, we have a big problem with mobile payments and kind of mobile games being these incredible sources of cash for some certain slightly less moral developers who might be kind of raking it in without people knowing that their children are spending thousands of pounds on little puzzle games and so on. So there's all kinds of issues that are raised by once you introduce spending real money in a game. And yes, that can be exploited. I think we need to talk more about some of those things and talk more about the kind of investment that's required to play certain games. Maybe in terms of money and time, indeed. But maybe it's okay that there are some games that appeal to that people who are willing to invest in that. And I think if you spoke to the people who spend that money, they'd be outraged at the idea that they would, you'd take away that leverage that they have. So maybe it's just about keeping a cap on it and making sure that some aspects of the game are open to everyone.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
Before we have something special for you, and I was going to keep it for the end, and I'm going to ask for the panel for 5 minutes, because we have this secretive, exciting project that I didn't know much about, so I was going to leave it at the end. But the collective here would like to present it before the event finishes, so I will ask C and I to come over and present the project, and I'll ask for your 5 minutes of patience, because we will lose our drift. While they're serving up, I will summarize a little bit of the discussion today and take the mic. I'm Greek, I don't need the mic usually. Just to say what a wonderful panel of speakers we had today and how insightful it was in terms of what we do in Cybersalon, the before and the after. And I was really taken by William's research and the neuroscience and the simulation. And I was wondering if William could elaborate a little bit, and I'll summarize, and then you can pick up some of my points, about the kind of inefficiency between the science that you're simulating and creating and the controls that they're out there to help you do the games. I found that really interesting, that on one side the science is really well developed, but the tools perhaps are not there yet. With Richard's talk, Richard, I want to know all the games you play online, and I want to be in your guild. And I think that we all feel the same way. Fascinating, especially when it comes to level design and what you said, the copy, the science, and not the art, and how much we need good gameplay in our MMOs. Tali, I think you didn't present so much the work she does with museums. So some of the discussions and the questions there. Your work is also applicable to learning environments. And finally, I think you summarized a lot of the points that is being discussed today in gaming. Addiction is definitely one of them. The idea of the good, the bad, and the ugly, and all the kinds of discussions about misogyny. Although gamers will tell you that they like titties made out of algorithms. There's nothing wrong with that. And before, please hold on to the questions, and I will now pass on to Sinai. Am I allowed to say anything now?
We'll say it.
Okay, okay, I'll pass it on to Sinai. Thank you.
In this playground of immortality, the preservation of experience has taken hold of our existence. We're able to stay connected even when hiding from one another. The illusion of companionship without the demands of relationships. We choose to text rather than talk. Where we are but simulations, we cannot be ourselves. These simulations blur the lines between fiction and reality. And when they permeate back into our lives, they obscure the sense of ourselves and of one another. Where both spectator and spectacle inhabit this blurred reality, eroding individuality and the sanctity of consciousness. Because we've grown up with technology, we assume technology has grown up too. We're being isolated as it continues to progress. And as we've never been taught how to be alone, we only know how to be lonely. The distinction between physical reality and its simulation is blurring. And if our consciousness is experienced through the perception of sight and sound, through interaction, through technology, and through our conception of knowledge, to what extent is it really our own?
Okay, yeah, so that's our project Seeing Eye, and it's a relatively simple concept and premise. For 28 days, I'm going to live through virtual reality glasses, and he's seeing and hearing what someone else sees and hears. That's the only bit simple about this project. Logistically, it's a nightmare and whatever. But so what I'll be seeing and hearing is what someone else, but let's say you for the sake of argument, is seeing and hearing. So there'll be a pair of glasses that you're wearing, which have microphone glasses in them, filming everything, and I'll be watching that for 28 days. The only thing that I have to do is I will shower, eat, and go to the toilet when and what you do. So I'll eat the same food as you and drink the same drinks to you, otherwise I'm free to move around the space as I like. So I will be in a room not too dissimilar from this. But yeah, as the project said, quite fittingly kind of following on, it's to do with the reality, and this is behind the scenes thing, by the way, from a 24-hour test run that we did. You know, with technology going the way that it is, you know, the reality of physical and simulation and our simulated environment is blurring, and we don't, you know, the realities are merging into one, and the effects that this all has on us. You know, as you were saying with your child, and you know, as you're saying with, you know, games are featuring into our life, but it goes further. It's technology, Facebook, Twitter, social media. You know, it is starting to affect who we inherently are, and our behaviour is changing from little things, from Facebook thriving on our insecurities, of, you know, when you get a little notification and it's like, oh yeah, great, someone's noticed me. Oh yeah, look, this is my life. You know, it's a celebrity life that we're now kind of all wanting without whether we even know it or not. That's the life that we're living, you know. Even the idea of me living as someone else for 28 days, that means someone else's life is being recorded. That means someone's so happy with the intrusion that that allows. But, you know, that's what's happening now, and, you know, more and more with, you know, NSA related, but not so much. But, you know, we're all we don't care that the NSA are all stalking us and know every intimate detail about us. We don't care that Facebook know everything about us. We don't care that all these places know more about us than we even know about ourselves. We're just happy because it's easy. And, you know, it touches upon various different elements of our reality and our future reality and possibly even our past reality. It's a conversation for a later date. But, you know, so, yeah, it's really seeing how I will behave and what the difference is in me and post it and before it. So I'm currently speaking to a psychologist to know what I'm like before. I strongly recommend that everyone should see a psychologist, by the way. But then up until the 28 days, I'll be seeing that same psychologist for an hour. Once the other person goes to sleep, I will be speaking to a neuroscientist through my headphones, still wearing the virtual reality glasses, more as a verbal diary than anything else, so we can have an in into what my mindset is. You know, if one day I'm saying he went to the shop today, he went to a football match, he ate this, and the next day I say I went to a football match, I did this, you know, we've suddenly got that I am believing that reality is my own. But then also, you know, he's a neuroscientist, he knows what he's doing. And then post it, we'll see how I change what my behaviour throughout the whole thing is. If I start mimicking him. So there's a moment, which will come in a minute, where he was playing Grand Theft Auto quite fittingly with them releasing, you know, first person. He was playing Grand Theft Auto and started shooting, and then I started going poo poo poo. And I didn't know that I'd done that until watching the footage back afterwards. That was the only kind of mimetic kind of bit that came into it. But, you know, it's only a 24-hour test run and it already started. That bit from running earlier, I was actually just jogging. Oh yeah, there it is. But, you know, like, the way that technology is influencing our lives, it, you know, it is influencing our lives, but we don't know to what extent it is going to influence our lives. And with virtual reality glasses coming onto the market properly this year and next year, really, you know, this is the beginning of what virtual reality is. Look to computers 20 years ago and look at them now. You know, that's the future, but we don't know what it is, and that's the test, really. So now the kind of sale bit. So we've launched this a few days ago, a week ago or so. To get funding for it, we're doing it through Kickstarter. So if you like the project, please donate, please share it, please spread the word. Thanks.
Okay, and with that, if anyone is interested, please contribute. And I will open now the discussion to a panel of speakers. But because I really liked my question to William, I will ask him to elaborate a little bit about that crossover, overlapping, or inefficiency of the technology in terms of the controller and what you're actually simulating in terms of science. I caught on that comment you made in your talk, so could you elaborate a little bit more?
So we're making the game for tablet, so one of the challenges is we've got a certain limited list of kind of interface devices we can use for tablet. So it's quite complicated actually to be able to rotate two structures simultaneously and try and dock them using the limitations of touch interface. So once you start working in this space, you actually hit some quite simple problems about how you control things, what the user. So one of the things we've done is, if you want to move, you've got these two structures. They look a little bit like the meteor that the space rocket landed on and bounced off. And so you're trying to rotate these structures, and it's quite difficult to work out where they are in Z space. And what we've done now is the person can pick up the shadow and pull that back and forth, and then that makes it enormously easier for them to rotate the structures accordingly. So the interface problems are quite complicated, let alone the physical simulation that you've got to then build it on top of. So, but it's the same problem with console controllers. There's limitations about how you can interact.
I had have 3 people doing mics, but I don't have a mic.
Hi, I've got a quick question for Richard. I think it's really relevant given the seeing eye stuff. I am somebody who works in multi-user virtual reality, so it all stems from mud, I'm completely aware. I'm just wondering, you were saying that when you were making it as a backlash to the world being crappy. Did you see when you were making it, this would be the metaverse, would be the grand unified virtual environment that it is almost destined to become at this point?
Yes.
Good.
This ties into what we just heard. Mud was always about freedom. It was about the freedom to be and become yourself. The real world, you're tied by your own physical condition. Yeah, here I am, look, 54-year-old man, I haven't got diabetes yet, but 10 years from now maybe. I mean, I'm stuffed, but in a virtual world I can be whoever I want to be. Now, as it happens, the way that virtual worlds are constructed is it's like a hill climbing algorithm, so that when you play them, you get to experiment, you get to wear other identities, you get to behave in ways you wouldn't normally. And through that, you see yourself through a mirror. Like you see yourself as others see you, and because of that, you can change your behaviour to be more like the real you, the you who's inside rather than the you who's presented to the rest of the world. So from what you were saying that you live the virtual reality, and how's it going to change you? Well, they were made to change you. That's the point. But they're supposed to change you into the you are, rather than the you that other people want you to be. And what you seem to be saying is that because other people control these worlds, they may be making you the person that you aren't, because they control the senses that are coming in. Yeah, go ahead.
The kind of premise almost for that, almost part of it, is the fact that my validation can only come from what I'm seeing and hearing. You know, I don't have people to validate my thoughts and who I am. But within a virtual world where you're seeing what everyone else is seeing, validation is standardized. You know, let's use Facebook as the example, but you know, we all have a standardized way that Facebook exists and Twitter and the virtual world. You know, virtual world is actually just a perfect capitalist form, but you know, it's a different conversation. You know, probably different thing, but internet-wise, I mean, not gaming. But when you're playing World of Warcraft, you're playing something like that, the validation is just what it is. It's already preset, it's already predetermined. That there is a difference, there's a jarring nature where it's an escape, but it's an escape to a new place where you need a new escape, I would argue, where it thrives off insecurities.
Well, sorry to be I'm carrying a conversation here, but that's what panels are for. Yeah, I would say that it depends on the individual, it depends on the virtual world, and some virtual worlds, I mean, World of Warcraft it's actually got pretty well designed as virtual worlds go. It tries not to put too much in the way of things, but people play these worlds for different reasons, they come from different directions. Essentially, they're all playing them in order that they can be themselves. That's what it is. But whether the world's structured to frustrate that or to facilitate that depends on the world. And some of the non-MMO style games are being constructed specifically in order to press buttons in people's heads to get them to pay money, for example. The technical term we use in the games industry is cheap psychological tricks. And so if you've got a game, this comes to the free-to-play thing, if you've got a game that's been built to push particular psychological buttons, well, most game designers wouldn't be comfortable with that. They want people to play their games because they're fun, not because they've addicted them. Now, your world, your experiment there, I mean, I got to hand it to you, it's pretty brave, because you might come out as a different you, and the you that comes out might be have a completely different opinion to the you who goes in.
Interestingly, the world isn't virtual, it's somebody else's life.
Well, it is virtual. I mean, all reality is virtual. The whole world is coming.
Yeah, okay.
The only experience is all through your
something
senses.
Physical life.
I've got a very good imagination. You could all be figments of my imagination. And when I die, you're all going to go. Sorry, folks. So yeah, I mean, I've got to hand it. I mean, it's pretty brave. I certainly wouldn't do it. I mean, it's but then I kind of like who I am.
So do I.
Oh, thanks.
Sorry, I've got a good question, and it's a quick one, and it's a quick run room. Most of us who've actually been gamers, and I suspect quite a few people here, have been apologising for most of our lives. What's been interesting about everything that we've spoken about is actually other applications beyond pure entertainment. It's the underlying thing. You know, we've talked about work. I mean, it's used in business schools on how to run companies. You know, they had questions about how you actually do clinical trials for what William's doing in terms of UCL. How long do you think we're actually going to have to apologise for our interest in the entire field beyond Zynga and farming?
So the interesting comment. So I did a lot of work with Hollywood, and definitely I made a decision to move from art and into entertainment. And once I started working in entertainment, I found it really liberating. It was extremely simple. You could put as much, working with Universal, put as much violence, sex into these games, and you certainly found that correlated with sales. There was an exact direct connection, and I sort of made this decision to move into that area. So people working in that area certainly are optimizing all those things. They know the number of beats per minute, the number of events that have to happen in a game has to be a certain number, and then the player's happy or they're not. So the whole thing has been completely optimized to enhance the user's experience. When I came out of entertainment, it was liberating again, being back in an interesting space which was more diverse. But interesting, I did a lot of work in Malta, and I did work with the gambling authority in Malta. And there's a growing sense that there need to be regulations put in place, the same that protect gamblers. Online, clock comes up, they're given warnings. If you've got a freemium game which is highly optimized, so such as CSR Racing, which is now part of Zynga, which is very, very optimized to make the player play at a particular point in time when their fuel runs out. They don't want to wait 5 minutes to recharge. That's a very, very similar experience to that which a gambler experiences. It's a pressured scenario where they will spend quite quickly. So there's a sense that at some point some of those regulations which have been enforced in gambling will move over into conventional games. And interestingly, the people that are asking for this is the larger corporations like Disney, Fox, where they don't want to have lawsuits from parents. So I think there's going to be a shift. I think regulations are going to probably move into non-gambling games, particularly around the freemium model.
I've got a question for Richard. I found it interesting that you said that one of the reasons why you did games, you were unsatisfied with this world and that it was political. Now, William Gibson recently said that with everything that's happened in technology, cyberspace is everted, and also then we've got people I'll cut long story short. Do you think we can use elements from games in real life to make a political difference? So, for example, could you use your follower account on Twitter to cast attention to important issues, for example? So, if cyberspace is reverted, then we're basically digital life is now in reality. Can we use that in a positive way to make a political difference?
Well, you're asking a question here which you might as well just have asked it about books. It's a medium. The way you're talking about it is a medium. And all these things, I mean, I'm somebody who, in books terms, writes novels. Many of the applications we've heard here are from people who have written in book terms, they are they're making textbooks, or they're making educational books, or there's a wide range of books. Now, why are we making a big fuss about games? What is it about games that's different to books? Well, books were invented a long time ago, and actually games predate them because bears play games. But video games, they're just a modern medium. So much of what the discussion goes on about, yeah, you can say things on Facebook and Twitter, and it'll influence the world. But yeah, that's always been the case for people who've had access to a medium. It just means that more people have got access to it, so there's more noise, so that it's harder to get the signal out. And I don't really see games, I particularly don't see Twitter as a game. I can see why Charlie Brooker calls it a game, but it isn't a game. It has only gameplay. But overall, if you look at this psychologist papers on games, about 70% of the writings psychologists do on games are about games causing aggression, about 20% are on games and addiction, and the rest are, there's a variety, but it's tended to be, think of the children. Now, if games really were as aggression causing as the psychologists think, there would be blood on the streets. We've had these games for 20 years as mainstream things. There hasn't been. But why are the psychologists all saying this? Because when the games first came out, it was a new medium. It was given, people were worried, they always are with new media, sometimes rightfully so, sometimes not. Money was invested to find out whether games do cause aggression or whether they don't. And the result was that the people who found that they didn't, well, that's a man not bitten by dog headline, so no one reads that. But the ones that did, that attracts the headline, gets the interest, the politicians get worried, the voters are worried, so they get more. And so on, until finally there's entrenched positions where you've got people who've been psychology professors for 20 years, whose careers are built on the fact that games cause aggression. And yet, when you look at the actual, if you're smart when you're making a prediction, you predict something is going to happen after you're dead. You don't predict something that's going to happen in your lifetime if it's not going to happen. And what they've said is the sky's falling in, and the sky isn't falling in. And so they've got a problem. All the psychology things have got a problem. But really, what they should have been doing is saying, well, let's look at games, let's look at television, let's look at field sports, contact sports, and all these other things. Where are they really different? And they aren't really different. Games are quite similar to other things in many respects. Where they are different is that games are a process which carries a payload of process-driven content, whereas things like art, paintings, a flat painting, a sculpture of three-dimensional shape, books are serial, a stream of text. So that's where you've got to look at the difference. But other things, it's a lot of what we already know from other media. It's just that games are interesting because they're cool right now.
Okay, we have time for one more question. There's one question, I think someone has the mic.
I just wanted to make a very
okay, of course.
Yeah, I think that's actually really interesting. The whole, and going back to Jim McGonagall's book, if you haven't read it, you really have to go read it, because she's talking about this exact thing, this idea that games are they're just new, and their newness is kind of a burden for them in our culture, and we're struggling to kind of understand that they can be quite, this is sort of a generic medium now, there's all sorts of things you can do with them. And I think that is just an arc, a curve that we're getting past. And yes, there are some voices who are still very resistant to games, but actually a lot of, there's quite a lot of psychological research which is making the most of games now and kind of looking at their benefits as well. And I think that it's just a matter of time. This is establishing itself as a medium in its own right, just like the printing press, just like television, just like film.
Yeah, essentially what we've got to do is to wait for all the old people who never played computer games to die, and then it'll be fine.
Just adding something different, just as a mom, I'm thinking here. I just feel maybe the whole world is globalized, firstly, and my kids have got so much to absorb to content-wise, information-wise, history-wise, going back to what I had to learn. And how do you expect them to learn and absorb all this knowledge for so many years without any creative medium? And like Richard quite rightly said, it's just a new medium. And I think this fits so well for the kids now of this generation. They just seem to learn and absorb so much more information as opposed to textbooks. I mean, my kid who sits in front of the TV and my mom tells me off saying that, oh, he's spending so much of time in front of a telly, and that's not right upbringing. But truly speaking, the amount of information he learned, he knows things that I didn't know myself on few things. And I don't feel guilty about that anymore, because some of the programs are so brilliant and he just learned so much. So it's just new medium. Games are one of those, yeah.
So
okay,
very quickly, yeah.
Yes, of course.
So I've got 6 children.
Wow.
And I didn't let, so I've got young twins every few months. But didn't let my children play games until they were at least 12. I personally think games are highly addictive. Things like World of Warcraft, clinics, it's the game with the highest number of addicts, because they're spending all their time grinding, doing repetitive things within the game rather than having fun. So yeah, I think games are highly addictive. Having made games, you quite quickly know how to make games that are very addictive. I think what's addictive about games is that behind every game, including Call of Duty, there's actually a puzzle that's hidden. So even if you're going through a level blowing things up, behind that there's a metagame which you can break down as a sort of mathematical puzzle with progressions. And we as humans are quite addictive to simple puzzles. I think it's a very interesting area. And also on violence, it's true that with Columbine, video games played a part. All those children who shot had played a lot of computer games, including Call of Duty. So that, I think there is a correlation. So at Goldsmiths, whenever I get asked to go talk to the Sun about violence in computer games, I never, ever talk to the press about it, because A, it's such a contentious area. My sense there is probably a connection, but it may not be the actual playing, but the effects of playing games can make certain teenagers disassociate themselves from society. So it's probably a result of the addiction that results in the connection with violence rather than playing a specific game. So I think it's a very, very tricky area, but that's my personal opinion.
Yeah, agree.
Okay, well, the discussion is now really going, so that is the time to move it to the pub, where you can have access to lovely speakers with a glass of wine or beer and approach them and speak. I think addiction, youth, representation of women, race, these are cultural aspects that need to be discussed in any medium. Addiction is really discussed a lot in video games right now. I won't take a position on it. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you for the lovely discussion and brilliant presentations. We have a video about Gamersgate will be uploaded on Cybersalon if you want to be educated, or just Google search it. Thank you so much again for everyone, and let's take it to the bar. Have a good night. And Eva has a couple of flags.
Off-grid, Richard will be taking people for the game up on the other side.
Yes, Richard here will be making a presentation for Off the Grid, which is a new indie game. So if you want to make your way towards there, Richard, stand up so they can see you. Yeah? Okay, have a good night, everyone.